Good afternoon to all the panelists and to all the viewers. Thank you all for joining in, and my greetings on the International Day of Democracy. Just for the benefit of viewers, I'll take a quick backgrounder on the International Day of Democracy. This provides an opportunity to review the state of democracies in the world over. Democracy is as much a process as a goal, and only with the full participation and support by the international community, the national governing bodies, the civil society organizations, and individuals can the ideal of democracy be made into a reality and enjoyed by everyone everywhere. So, what are the basic essentials of democracy? The values of freedom, respect for human rights, holding of periodic and genuine elections, and this is one of the core values, the principles of United Nations. Democracy provides environment for the protection and effective realization of human rights, and the UN promotes good governance, monitors elections, supports civil society to strengthen the democratic institutions and accountability, and also ensures self-determination in decolonized countries. Now, with that as the background, the aim of the webinar today is to review the state of democracy and discuss the role of citizens in improving the future of the Indian democracy. To discuss this, we have a very distinguished panel of eminent personalities comprising Dr. S.Y. Qureshi, who is the former Chief Election Commissioner of India, Professor Jagdeep Chokar, who is the founder member of ADR, Ms. Leena Tamang, who is the Regional Director for Asia and Pacific for the International Institution for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, called IDEA generally, and Mr. Nikhil Dey, who is the founder member of MKSS and of NCPRI. I would request each speaker to speak for about 10 to 12 minutes. And the sequence of speaking would be, we would request Dr. Qureshi to start after a little while when I finish with my opening remarks, followed by Ms. Leena Tamang, followed by Mr. Nikhil Dey, and lastly, Professor Chokar. Now the slides, we may just show those slides, please. As per the, yeah, kindly show those. Okay, so as per the slides of the Freedom House publication, we can see that generally there is a decline in the democratic process all over the globe. And it started about 15 years back, and in 2020, the number of free countries reached its lowest level since the beginning of the period of democratic decline. The freedom of expression experienced the largest decline of any democracy indicator since 2012. And as we are all aware, the pandemic of COVID-19 crisis exploited to quash the opposition, and this resulted in excessive surveillance, discriminatory restrictions on freedom, arbitrary and violent enforcement, and as a result, transparency was the hardest hit. Freedom declined in the US by 11 points in the last 10 years due to political corruption, lack of transparency, and punitive immigration and asylum policies. India's status as the world's populist democracy dropped from free to partly free status. As a result of the crackdown on critics, political rights, and civil liberties, the country have also deteriorated. At the same time, there is a growing desire for good governance the world over, and successful protests in countries have led to certain democratic improvements. Next slide, please. To reverse the global shift towards authoritarian norms, democracy advocates working for freedom in their home countries, and this will need robust solidarity from like-minded allies abroad. Global leadership and solidarity from the democratic states are urgently needed. Governments that understand the value of democracy have a responsibility to band together. Democracy, fortunately, is remarkably resilient and has proved its ability to rebound from repeated blows. Most free countries resisted further declines. Democracy has demonstrated its adaptability under the unique constraints of a world afflicted by COVID-19. And we can see that a number of successful elections were held across all regions and countries at all levels, at all income levels, including India. Even in the most regressive environments, journalists sought to shed light on government transgression, and ordinary people continued to express discontent on topics ranging from corruption and systemic inequality to the mishandling of the health crisis, letting their leaders know that the desire for democratic governance will not be easily quenched. Okay, thank you. Now, there are different agencies which are rating and evaluating the number of countries the whole world which are, but by and large there are certain indicators, which of which I would say the prime thing is freedom. And under freedom, we can list out various factors like election integrity, media freedom, freedom of expression, religious freedom, equality, human rights, government accountability and transparency, freedom of assembly, and strong civil society. So, before I invite Dr. Qureshi, a quick introduction, a very brief introduction about him. Dr. S.Y. Qureshi joined IAS, that is the Indian Administrative Service, in 1971 and was the 17th Chief Election Commissioner of the Election Commission of India. He is figured in the Indian Express of 100 Most Powerful Indians of 2011-12. He has authored a monumental book by the name of An Undocumented Wonder, The Making of the Great Indian Election. And he has also compiled and edited the book, The Great March of Democracy, 7 Decades of Indian Elections. He is also the India's representative in the advisory board of the IDEA. With that, I would now request Dr. Qureshi to kindly give his views. Over to Dr. Qureshi.
Thank you, General Sir. Just one correction that I am on the board of International IDEA, but not as India's representative, but in my individual capacity, because there is another steering committee which has an official Indian representative, which is our ambassador in Sweden. This is my third term and it's about to finish in December. 9 years. It was originally the first 6 years, 2 terms of 3 years each, but they made a special dispensation and took me on for the third term, for which I am very grateful to the former Secretary General, Yves Leterme. Now, I'm very happy that my colleague Lena is here from Canberra, I suppose, today. So she and I have worked very closely together for the last 9 years in different capacity, and we would like to have a formal association of ADR with the international idea, and I have requested the Secretary General to consider signing an MOU with ADR. It doesn't have any legal implication, no financial implication. It's just information sharing and cooperation. All it takes, and the cause is common to both the organizations. With these words, the topic of today: role of citizens in improving the future of democracy. So I start with a question: whether there is a question mark on our democracy, which is what we are trying to improve, which is why this webinar. If there is a need for improvement, what exactly is the improvement that we are looking at? So General Verma's slide did indicate some sliding down on various indexes of democracy. Now, there are about a dozen indexes of democracy worldwide. Mind you, I'm using the word indexes and not indices because these are different indexes which are playing with various indices. So these are two terms not to be confused. So there are 12 types of the indexes, and even our international idea has GSOD, the Global State of Democracy Index, which we started only about 3-4 years ago, 4-5 years ago. Now, all these indexes have shown a very clear decline in the last few years. Now, first, the Freedom House Index of 2021 pushed India down 4 points from 71 to 67 and downgraded us from free country to partially free country. Imagine the largest democracy in the world is being regarded as a partially free country in media freedom. It's a shame. Then VDEM. VDEM is a big think tank in Sweden, and they, or in similar evaluation, they have downgraded us to electoral autocracy. Here we were planning to become the greatest, from the largest democracy to the greatest democracy, and we have been downgraded to electoral autocracy. Then EIU, which is Economist Intelligence Unit, they've been bringing out their democracy index for the last how many years? Since 2006, and our rank used to be all these years we were classified as in the second category, which is flawed democracy. Full democracy, then there are flawed democracy. We have been flawed democracy all through. The next is hybrid democracy, and the way we are slipping, in a year or two, we might find ourselves as a hybrid democracy, which will be a shame. Now, our score plummeted, which was in 2014, 7.92 on a scale of 10, 7.92. It has slipped to 6.61 in 2020. And our rank as a democracy, which was 27 in 2013, and just we were 2 ranks short of becoming a full-fledged democracy in 2013. And where are we now? 53 out of 167 countries. This is what the largest democracy in the world is doing. Now, Reporters Without Borders, its press freedom report shows us that 167 out of 183 countries. 167. Shame. Now, what are the factors responsible for declining indices? Here I'm using the word indices. Increased pressure on human rights and civil rights organizations. Human rights is the dirty word of abuse for the government, a red rag to the bull. And civil rights organizations, government hates them. Every government, for that matter, some government particularly so. Now, journalists and activists are intimidated and jailed. If you look at the statistics, you'll be appalled. Minorities are targeted. Hate and polarization is rampant. It's for everyone to see. Amnesty International has halted its operation in India. It's beyond repair for them. Now, there is 165% increase in sedition cases against journalists and citizens for just criticizing the government. The government is not doing well. Oh, sedition, put him in jail. And 165% increase. We are behaving worse than a dictatorial regime. Now, in this situation, to expect government to act is futile. Surely they will not act because most of it is they are doing. The authoritarian trend and tendency is from the government. So for them to expect us to do something about it is silly. So because it is a part of political agenda, instead of remedial measures, it defends its activities and all these activities which are happening all the time, lynching and rape and whatnot. Now, instead of introspection, the government challenges these ratings. Recently, the case in point is recently Government of India approached the EIU office, Economist office in London, and said that your figures are false, biased, and misinformed. And please tell us what are your sources. Now, why do we want to know the sources? So that we can do income tax raid on them and make sure that they send doctor data. And they offered, look, we don't know what your sources are, and they're obviously very false. We will give you the data. Tell us what you want. We will give you the data. I think government data is the most reliable. Now, the government data, if you read the former chief economist of the World Bank, Mr. Kaushik Basu, lately it's a fabricated data. Anything which is not flattering is being suppressed. Either the parameters are being changed, or the data is being banned, or is being replaced. So they only want flattering data, and any reality check is just not acceptable. Now, this is the state of our democracy. Now, obviously, EIU rejected this offer. They said, number one, we will not tell you our sources because then you will go and intimidate them. And secondly, in any case, EIU in its report every year very clearly spells out how they collect this data. There are 5 parameters on which they collect the data through 60 questions. And what are those 5 parameters? Electoral processes and pluralism. Of course, electoral process we score very highly. So far, we are perhaps among the best. Then functioning of the government, political participation, political culture, and civil liberty. When I was writing my book, which General Verma mentioned in the introduction, An Undocumented Wonder, that was the first time when I was full of praise for my own organization, great work that we are doing. That is the first time when I heard the word flawed election. And I was also offended. I was also hurt, and I thought, oh, must be another Western conspiracy. They make parameters to show India in a bad light. But when I studied the report in detail, I realized exactly the same concerns have brought us down, made us flawed, about which we are talking our hordes every day, about which General Verma just now mentioned criminalization of politics. 43% of our legislators have criminal cases, and some of them serious rape, dacoity, murder, kidnapping. So, or very low representation of women. At the moment, 14%, they should be 50%. Very high illiteracy, 25%, 300 million people are illiterate. Now, these are the things which are bringing us down. These are our concerns. But if a global index shows us in a poor light, we cannot be shooting the messenger. We have to take note of what they're saying, and we have to try and improve this. Now, the Kaushik Basu has used a strong word that we are fabricating data. Our unemployment is the highest ever in 44 years. We don't want to hear it, so we NSSO and all these organizations which are coming out with data, they have been shut down virtually. We have a very nose-diving economy, so nobody should know the figures. The GDP figures all manipulated. COVID data. Nobody died of COVID in India. Nobody died of oxygen shortage, and anybody who said there is oxygen shortage because his father was dying and not getting a hospital was put behind the bars for sedition. Treason, sedition. This is what is happening to our democracy. Now, one silver lining. In fact, today I have written an article in Indian Express on the occasion of International Day of Democracy. Some of these points are mentioned there. Now, last year on 30th of January 2020, silver lining, the Committee of Secretaries examined 32 internationally recognized indices to improve performance. That, I think, is the right approach. Because that is real. If we are going down, let us see why we are going down and can we improve them. In fact, there is a success story which I have asked them to emulate. Same Niti Aayog, our planning commission successor, Niti Aayog. They 2-3 years ago they flagged one issue that in the global index of ease of doing business we were very low. They picked it up as a single point program and put everything into it to see that we improve, and we shot up 30-40 ranks just in 1 year. Can we do a similar exercise about all these indices on which we are going down to see whether we can improve them? Can we improve civil liberties? Can we improve our freedom of press, media, citizens' participation? And finally, I come to the last a couple of minutes. What can citizens do? Because the topic is what the role of citizens in improving democracy. Government will not do anything, not doing anything. If they do, that will be nice, as I've suggested. Now, they should participate in democracy through elections very proactively. They should enroll without fail, because when we set up our voter education division 8 years ago, there were only 12 to 15% enrollment of youth and 18 to 19 age group. Now it is about 80%. We would like 100% youth to get enrolled. They should check their electoral roll frequently, because sometimes there may be a mistake or some slip up or computer error or deliberate mischief, whatever. But it is important to keep checking your electoral roll that you are there. If for some reason your name gets deleted, no power on earth can make you vote. Then you should vote. Turnout. The turnout used to be very low, particularly of youth and so-called urban educated people. They never voted and they used to brag about it. Oh, I've never voted in my life. Now, if you have never voted in your life, you have no business to sit in your drawing room and criticize politicians. So instead of a fashion statement, we wanted to change it into a statement of shame and embarrassment. So we launched our voter education campaign, and those who were bragging that they have never voted, they were hiding their faces and they were showing their marked finger. Look, I have voted. I have voted. So that is the behavior change we were able to bring about. And also, when you're there voting, we expect them to do ethical voting, which again, General Verma pointed out that they should vote for good candidate. Now, when we ask for ADR, the nowadays are demanding that people against whom criminal cases are pending should be debarred from contesting election. Now, the blame is put on the voter, citizens. Okay, it is the citizens who are voting them to power. So now, if you are the villain, you citizens, if you are the villain, so you need to introspect. Why the hell are you voting them to power? Why ADR is regularly publicizing it in all kinds of media, the track record of these. And it is because of ADR that Supreme Court had given a judgment 20 years ago that every candidate at the time of nomination will give an affidavit giving his financial dealings and also the criminal cases against him. And lately, only 6 months ago, Supreme Court has again come down heavily on this, and they said every candidate, every party has to advertise it in newspapers that there are criminal cases against their candidate. Despite that, if you are voting for them, so maybe the citizen cannot escape the blame. They have to raise their voice against all evils like lynching and atrocities and the hate campaign and which is happening. They should go to court. Why just ADR? The citizen can go to court in PIL. And citizens should strengthen saner voices, civil society organization. They should patronize liberal media, buy the newspapers which are liberal, watch the TV channels which are liberal and which are honest, and ban and boycott those which are showing only propaganda. So, and finally, raise your voice in social media. So citizen can do a lot because, and in fact, the entire onus has now come on them. And I'm very happy that ADR has chosen this subject for this very, very important day. And I'm congratulating everybody on International Voters' Day. Sorry, International Day of Democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Qureshi, for your remarks, and you've given some very good suggestions. I dare say that though amongst all forms of governing, democracy is the best, there is no doubt, because most of the countries are following it. However, democracy doesn't guarantee that the competent leadership and effective governance will result. So that is where the citizens come in, or politics who are chosen or who are elected is extremely important. That is my view. So with that, I would now request Ms. Leena Tamang, Regional Director of Asia Pacific of International IDEA, but just a quick word about her background. She joined International IDEA in 2002. Between 2004 and 2013, she managed International IDEA's programs on supporting constitution building process in Nepal. Prior to her time in Nepal, she worked at the South Asia program, including Myanmar, at the International IDEA. She is a former Secretary General of Finland's Advisory Board for Relations with Developing Countries in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She is a member former chair in 2001-2 of the Network Institute for Global Democracy, documents about democratic participation and inclusive democratic process. With that, I would now request Ms. Leena to kindly give our views. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Verma, and greetings, yes, from Canberra, from Australia. And thank you so much for inviting me, an International IDEA, to this webinar. And a very good International Day of Democracy to everyone, a day that is slowly gaining more prominence in the calendars of democracy workers. So we are to talk about the future of Indian democracy and role of citizens in shaping that future. I'm very cognizant of the fact that I'm not Indian, so a bit hesitant to say too much about the future of Indian democracy, how it may look like. But what I can do is to show what the democracy data tells us about the past and present, and perhaps from there we can predict how the trends may develop. So I have a few slides, just because the data is often more powerful when visualized. So if I could have that, my PowerPoints on.
Yeah, it will take a little while. They'll just do it.
Yeah, so you can move on from the starting point. The next slide. The International IDEA, we are launching now a global state of democracy biannually, and next one is coming out in a few months' time, towards end of November, early December. And the statistical data that provides the basis for the report is what we call Global State of Democracy Indices. And the 2020 data was made available in June this year. And the data that I present, it draws from our indices. And as Dr. Qureshi explained, I know there has been quite a lot of debate in India around the various indices, including BDEM, Freedom House, and so on. So I will very briefly explain what our indices is about and what do we measure when we measure democracy. Yes, next. Yeah, you can have next. Yeah. So our data indices cover 165 countries across the world for the period of 1975 up to 2020, so about 45 years. And our index is being developed based on international ideas definition of democracy, which is based on these two broad principles in the middle: popular control over decision making and political equality in exercise of that control. So very simple definition for democracy. And these principles have been then translated into 5 core attributes of democracy, which are the last large circles that you can see, and which IDEA believes are the key elements of any healthy democracy: representative government, fundamental rights, checks on government, impartial administration, and participatory engagement. And these are then further divided into 16 sub-attributes and 116 indicators. And our underlying data draws from 12 high-quality datasets, including VDEM, but also 11 other datasets, including many UN ones. So there's much to say about the indices and data and methodology, but in interest of time, I just simply encourage you to visit our website and have a look and assess yourself. So let's dive in. Oh, it's very small. But here is the Indian Democracy Profile 2020. Here the green refers to high-performing aspects, yellow is medium performing, and red is points out to weak performance. So on 2020, what remains green is the elected government and inclusive suffrage. And then the red ones are related to direct democracy, which is about referendums, but also citizen initiatives, agenda initiatives, and so on, and other forms of direct democracy. And another one on the red here is social rights and equality. And if you look at the 2015, there was more green on the profile, including electoral participation and clean elections. And if you take the next slide, please. So if we go even 5 years further back to 2010, the profile was even greener. There was also checks on government. Under checks on government, media integrity was green in 2010. So I will not go through all these attributes, but I wanted to highlight a few. If you can send the next one. The first one on representative government and how the attributes of clean elections, inclusive suffrage, free political parties, and elected government have developed over the years. And as was mentioned, the clean elections is very high in India in terms of global and regional comparisons. But as you can see, it's starting to decline from slightly. Already from 2008-9, and that's, I think it's something to send a sort of what we call a weak signal, something to start to get a bit worried about, so that it doesn't decline any further. Next one. The next one is on the checks on government and how that has developed. It covers the effective parliament, judicial independence, and media integrity. And as you can see, the media integrity that used to be very high performing is starting to decline from about 2013. And next. And participatory engagement, our topic of the day, looks at the civil society participation, electoral participation, as well as local democracy. So we can see the decline in civil society participation starting sort of 2011, 2012. On the other hand, we see electoral participation increasing from 2013. Here, just to note that the electoral participation is not a synonym to voter turnout. It also covers some other aspects of electoral participation. But there we can see, talking of the silver linings, as Dr. Qureshi said, here we can see some increase. And the next one. So if you zoom a little bit more in detail into civil society participation and in comparison with the world average and the South Asian average, India was above these until 2015. And now civil society participation is below world and slightly below the South Asian average as well. And here the last one about the, just to show you the electoral participation and comparison with South Asian average, where India fares better than the South Asia in general. The next one. Yeah, so that is the end of the slides, and then just a few words about the regarding the future of Indian democracy. So if you look at the profile of 2020, you would think that if the trends would continue along the similar lines, meaning sort of a gradual decline, that would mean that the quality of democracy would further suffer, because the past has certainly been more green. However, I think there is also reasons to be optimistic about. As the Indian scholar D.L. Seth, whom I admired and whom I had an honor to call a friend, and who sadly passed away in May this year, he often reminded me that the democracy's really the finest quality is its capacity to self-correct. There will be setbacks, there will be blips, but democracy eventually will correct itself in case something is going overboard. And that's something that the authoritarian regimes, the authoritarian regimes do not have. And of course, the one way for democracies to self-correct is through elections. And that's why there is ever more reason to cater to all the attributes related to integrity of elections, including, of course, the cost of elections that ADR has been working on as well. As we know, the one election after the other has been more expensive than the previous one in India. So this is a kind of a weak signal that I think would be is important to look at. And my second reason for being optimistic is the inherent diversity, plurality of ways of being, ways of living in India. And I'm again leaning on D.L. Seth and what he has said about Indian democracy setting motion of what he called a bloodless revolution on when it comes to giving dignity to large segments of societies that for long have been denied those recognitions. And those kind of things are not often captured in the democracy indices of our sorts or the others. And lastly, third one, perhaps the pandemic has taught us really the value of bottom-up approach rather than centralized approaches. The role of local governments in managing future emergencies, as well as the quality, hopefully the quality of democracy is only to increase. And we know that the local democracy often represents democracy at its best, not necessarily, but often. And I think India has all the structures for further reinvigorating democracy at the local level. I stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lina, for giving us the global perspective with your data and wonderful slides, as also which included India. And of course, like I remarked, the strongest features of democracy is its resilience, and it is the civil society and the people and the media and all which have to sort of grip the bull by the horns and take it on from there. And the pandemic, as I also very briefly mentioned, has shown us how some of the governments have become more authoritarian by imposing various issues on the common man. And but I would like to say that India, which is the size of a subcontinent, and we have extreme diversity, but the nation is striving towards unity in diversity, and it is not a easy country to rule or govern. But I also feel the ultimate aim of democracy is not to only have good election and various other freedoms on which we are discussing. The ultimate aim is to uplift the standard of living of the common man. And that is related to development, and that is related to good governance. And that can happen only when the quality of our leaders improves. That is why it is imperative that our citizens choose leaders. Thank you very much. With that, now I'll move over to Mr. Nikhil Dey. A brief, quick introduction about him. Nikhil Dey is a social activist and founder member of the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, popularly known as MKSS. And in 1987, he joined Aruna Roy and Shankar Singh to go to a place called Devduri in Rajsamand district in Rajasthan, where along with many others, they helped founded the MKSS. Since 1990, he has been a full-time worker of MKSS and has been involved in struggles of the poor for justice, including grassroots struggles for land and the payment of minimum wages. He has also been part of people's organizations taking responsibility for putting together people's drafts of the Right to Information and Employment Guarantee Bills. Nikhil has also played a prominent role in the ongoing efforts by the People's Movement to build institutions of participating. He will cover Ordia and Guarantee Council and the State Employment Guarantee Council of Rajasthan. He is also a co-convener of the National Campaign for People's Right to Information. With that, I'll request Nikhil to give his comments. Over to you, Nikhil.
Thank you so much, General Verma, Dr. Qureshi, Mr. Mang, and to all the Jagdeep ji, who I can't see, but who I presume will come, and all the others who are listening into the show, maybe will listen in. Hello, Jagdeep ji. So, and the others who may come on later. I think I'd like to start with saying that, we keep reassuring ourselves that democracy has great resilience, but of course it has. That's like saying life has great resilience. But I don't think that is a standard that we can hold ourselves to. I think that as citizens and as people and as what we expect from our governments, we have to hold them to much sharper standards. We have to be much more critical. And we have to not rely on this fact that democracy has some natural resilience, because we live in democratic countries that have a mandate that has to be followed. And therefore, I think we need to be much sharper in it, as well as understand that this is not something that will self-correct on its own. We have to play a role. And that is what democracy is in essence. It's the role of the citizen. And that's why the topic that you have today of the role of the citizen in improving the future of India's democracy or democracies around the world, because we are so connected, are essential. There are two parts in India's democracy that I'd like to first focus on in terms of a crisis. One is a crisis of what you mentioned here. We are now increasingly being seen as, and we are an elected autocracy. There is an election process, but there are too many autocratic measures that are being undertaken that we cannot then call ourselves a democracy. It's not merely an election, obviously. So if you do not have the freedom of speech, if you do not have dissent, if you do not have certain levels of capacity to be able to say what kind of development you want, what kinds of policies you want, if you cannot have citizens' participation in lawmaking, you are an elected autocracy. And worse still in India, when you are starting to see yourselves as a majoritarian democracy, where you can somehow willy-nilly get elected, but then you use that force of your majorities to completely ride roughshod over minorities who are many. There are many different kinds of minorities, and you worked it out in that way. So you are partially free, yes. In fact, you're much worse than that, because I don't know whether things like injustice and justice, freedom and partial freedom are even possible. You either have justice or you don't. You either have freedom or you don't. And you use the little bits of freedom whenever it is, which is the birthright, to do what you can. Similarly, I don't go into that one quotation, but Dr. Ambedkar at the time of our Indian Constitution, which I think is an extraordinary document, and it is much more indicative of our democracy than merely elections, where he talked about that we are entering into a life of contradictions, and we are talking about political equality, and the main contradiction is actually one of inequality. We are having political equality in terms of one person, one vote, but along with that, we also have a huge amount of continued social inequality, where we have a completely skewed society, which is getting even more skewed because based on religion or based on certain kinds of norms, we actually are not getting rid of our inequalities, and we are not giving space to that. And we have more and more economic inequality. Nothing could be more dramatic than that, than the pandemic, where we thought everyone was suffering, but the top 100 billionaires of this country earned huge amounts. So the pandemic did them good. So it actually shows that we are only increasing our inequalities. And Dr. Ambedkar said that we will blow up our political democracy if we do not take care of those. It's in that context that I want to talk about being part of a peasant and workers organization, being part of an organization that sees great value in democracy, because the poor have no other place to speak except in a democracy. And if they cannot speak, they cannot get justice, because those who are marginalized cannot get justice. And it's not merely their vote, it is their everyday fight for justice. I'd like to just very quickly look at what is the right to information movement from bottom up in India. I just look at two slogans. One slogan was "Hamara paisa, hamara hisab," our money, our accounts. People said every rupee belongs to us. It's not merely our vote. And the accounts of every rupee is something we will assert, not just through our representatives, but ourselves. How was the money spent? So it's a very powerful idea of democracy. The idea that it is accounts, it is accountability, and everything is something that we will hold government
Nikhil, we can't hear you clearly. I think it's some internet issue. Can you hear me? Your voice is breaking. We can't hear you. Is it okay if we come back to you after a little while? Okay, Nikhil, we will come back to you after a little while. I'll now request Dr. Professor Jagdeep Chokar to join and give remarks. Just a brief, quick introduction.
You're still not able to hear me?
Yeah, okay, now we can. Now we can. Yeah. Okay. Hello. Hello. Nikhil, if we can come back to you after 10-15 minutes, Professor Chokar's talk. Hear you. Okay.
Is this better now, General Verma? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So my apologies. I don't know whether I could be heard at all. I'll try and shorten what I had to say. I've changed my internet connection to something else. So is this better? Can you hear me clearly enough?
Yeah. Last 2-3 minutes we did hear what you said.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll just try and repeat very quickly because I think it's important to me that that be heard, that the right to information movement came up with an idea that democracy is everyone's birthright. It is a daily occurrence. It is not only daily, it is not an episodic election occurrence, which is of course important. I'm not belittling the importance of elections, but it is our everyday interaction with every aspect of the state, of society, and of governance. And therefore, the right to information movement had two very powerful slogans. One was our money, our accounts, where it said every single rupee needs to be looked at and examined by people. And therefore, it was a very powerful idea of democracy, of auditing the expenditure of government at all times. And the second was the right to know, the right to live, which is again a very powerful idea that without knowing, you cannot live, without knowing what's in your rations, in your wages, in your land, in your kind of model of development, or in your what your candidates are spending, or what their assets were and what their assets are. So what ADR used also is again the right to know and the right to live, and connecting issues of transparency with actually survival. These are bottom-up ideas that have become very powerful. They were legislated through a people's law and through a people's campaign. And they brought an idea not just of participatory and direct democracy, but to say that democracy has to be many things at one time. And even the elected representatives have to be similarly accountable. It is not to do away with representative democracy, but to make it accountable at all times to the citizens. I would like to now refer to a quote of Dr. Ambedkar, where what do we do if we are facing these kinds of things? So one idea of this is this idea of bottom-up democracy. But another idea that I'd like to just talk about, that Dr. Ambedkar, when he started off saying that there are these contradictions we are entering into, he said in 1949 on the 26th of November, he said the third thing we must do is not to be content with mere political democracy. We must make our political democracy a social democracy as well. Political democracy cannot last unless there lies at the base of it social democracy. What does social democracy mean? It means a way of life, which recognizes liberty, equality, and fraternity as the principles of life, not just of our interaction with government. These principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity are not to be treated as separate items in a trinity. They form a union of trinity in the sense that to divorce one from the other is to defeat the very purpose of democracy. Liberty cannot be divorced from equality, equality cannot be divorced from liberty, nor can liberty and equality be divorced from fraternity. Without equality, liberty would produce the supremacy of the few over the many. Equality without liberty would kill individual initiative, and without fraternity, liberty and equality could not become a natural course of things. It would require a constable to enforce them. The reason I bring this up is because today in a majoritarian system, we have very great dangers of democracy being used to actually completely pervert what the nature of democracy is. Unless we have an idea that every individual's dignity will be protected, we cannot have minorities, we cannot have marginalized communities, we cannot have the poor retaining their dignity. This is a challenge we faced even at the bottom. When we were saying that we would use the right to information, our money, our accounts, it became a means of doing social audit or public audit. Now, even there, where we see a local democracy in the Gram Sabha or in the People's Assembly, often you can have marginalized communities completely suppressed, their voice suppressed, unless you say that every individual voice counts. When they are raising an issue, every voice and their dignity counts. Their liberty counts. And that is the true meaning of fraternity that you have to see. So when we say, and here I'm going to propose that what we need for citizens improving democracy is a number of social democracy, social audits, if you are going to look at money, social accountability, if you're going to hold people to account, there is a version not just of accountability to someone upwards, but to the people themselves and to the most marginalized first. That kind of accountability we need in a democracy. We need a social audit of the media, because the so-called pillar of freedom is actually, it's free, but it is not independent. It is dependent on corporate interests and money. So therefore, we have to have a social audit of media also ongoing. We have to have a social audit of elections, and that's what Election Watch is. And here I'd like to very briefly say that within that, we need to have an Election Watch that looks at funding. We have electoral bonds in India, which is a complete, not only skewing of what is transparency, but also how corporate bodies will completely give all their money to, and you cannot have free and fair elections if money is going to go to one set of people who are in power already. We have to have a social audit of campaigns, election campaigns, where the polarization that is deliberately done on the basis of religion today in our country and various other things, we are seeing it in UP, has to be controlled. And we have to have the model code of conduct far more effective through people. We have to have a social audit of voting, where I know with Dr. Qureshi, we've had this debate many times, but electoral rolls, completely we are in agreement, but EVMs we feel must be made far more transparent, and through the process of VVPATs be made far more transparent, because they can today, if not today, tomorrow be manipulated, and therefore a sense of confidence has to come amongst people that electoral voting machines are not going to be manipulated. And this is something which Jagdeep ji also, I know, ADR has been taking up. And finally, the Election Commission, Dr. Qureshi and the chair he sat on, that credibility is being seriously undermined because of the appointments and because of the way that they are functioning. So we need a citizens' watch on that. And therefore, Election Watch needs to be far more powerful from today if we are going to make that electoral system have credibility. I'm going to say last two things very quickly. We therefore need a social audit of democracy, which includes strengthening participatory democracy and making sure representative democracy is all the time accountable to the people themselves and to the citizens themselves. There's too little time and too many ways and means. I think people are doing it, but they are fighting with their backs to the wall. And I think in this.
Hello. Okay, we can't hear him. Can you hear me? Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I think there's some issue with Nikhil again, and I think he's more or less wound up. So I'd like to thank Nikhil for giving the perspective from the grassroots level where he works in the villages of Rajasthan, and he's covered a wide canvas of issues: participatory democracy, and RTI, and social audit of various things. Given a number of suggestions, like process of ADR. He's been the director in charge of Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and earlier also worked in the Indian Railways as a mechanical engineer for over a decade, and as a marketing manager with the public sector organization for 4 years. He has a wide experience of teaching in universities in Australia, France, Japan, and the US. With that much, I would now request Professor Chokar to kindly give his remarks. Thank you. I think you are muted. We can't hear you. Hello, Nandini, we can't hear him.
So we can't hear you.
Hello.
His mic is on.
Okay, but we can't hear. Not audible.
Anas will be
General
coordinating.
साहब आगे से StreamYard ना use किया कीजिए. Most useless system. Most useless. It kills the webinar.
Mm-hmm. Hello.
Sir, Anas is coordinating with Choker, sir. Just give us a few minutes.
Okay.
Meanwhile, maybe Nikhil sir can cover his points.
Yeah, I can hear, and I don't know if you can hear me now. So, yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah. Okay. So yeah,
And I don't know how much of my last bit was heard.
Just last 2 minutes we couldn't hear.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I only said that basically in my last 2 minutes that there must be a much stronger sense of solidarity for action, because democracy is basically in how things are playing out on the ground.
Okay.
I think those indices that we are talking about need to translate into standing by each individual case that is facing the issues that they face.
Okay.
Because democracy is
Thank
really
you.
a way of life.
Thank you.
Choker, sir, can we check your mic again once?
We can't hear.
We can't hear.
Not working. Okay.
Why don't we do the Q&A until Jagdeep can be connected?
Yeah, I was just about to say that. So while you people try to connect him, I think we'll go to the question answer session. Can the first question be shown, please? Okay. So this question is addressed to Ms. Leena. How have other countries ensured that persons with pending criminal cases against them are prevented from standing for elections and coming to power in lawmaking legislatures and parliaments?
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that question. I would have to do a little bit more research because not a country comes to mind where anyone would be prevented because of the pending case. I mean, there are, of course, laws restricting ability of when if you have been sentenced to engage in politics. For example, here in Australia, different states have very differing, actually varying practice here. Or, I mean, obviously, for example, in Queensland, the convictions, if you have ever been sentenced for political bribery, you are prevented from being a candidate for a fixed period of time. And Commonwealth, if you have ever been sentenced for a crime that is punishable for more than a year, then that disqualifies from you be running as a candidate. So it's also related to whether you are convicted, as well as depending on for how long maximum sentence for the crime. Like Western Australia, the person who is convicted for felony is barred holding office for the rest of his or her life. Whereas in Finland, where I'm originally from, once you have suffered your sentence, you are considered again citizen with all the rights and also a right to run for elections. But there's a lot of course, there's a lot of organizations who keep a close eye on this. So political parties hardly put candidates pending cases because that would be, at least in countries like Australia, Finland, they would be discussed in the media, and it would not be something that would give you a winnable candidate. I was just looking at for example, in Nepal, it's the same. Only if you have been punished for any criminal offense involving moral turpitude is not eligible to run. And I remember when the constitution writing, we were involved in that, and there was this debate whether there should be a provision about the pending cases, but then there were a lot of discussion about, well, where would we draw the line if you get the traffic ticket, or where should it be that it is punishable for that you have a pending case where a potential sentence would be so and so many years, or where would you draw the line? It's a good question. Would need a little bit time to do a research on countries. Normally, it is always only if you are sentenced, it's not related to the pending cases.
Okay. Thank you, Lina. Can we try Professor Choker's audio once, please?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you, sir. Yeah. So, can you start?
This break has kind of put me off what I was thinking of. But anyway, after listening to these three very, very knowledgeable presentations, I am not actually very sure of what to say, but I will try and do the best I can. The first point I wish to emphasize, which has been emphasized earlier also, is that elections are not democracy. And that is where the citizens interact with the democracy the most. A lot of people think that just because they go and vote, they have done their bit in democracy. I think that assumption is faulty. And therefore, it is important for citizens to realize that their job does not end with voting. Democracy, as General Verma said right in the beginning, is a process. It goes on and on and on and on. Elections are events which happen once after 5 years or whatever number of years one has provided for. So citizens must understand that democracy is like breathing. You cannot not pay attention to democracy. And I think this is where we have the maximum work to do, because all categories of citizens are under this impression that my job is to vote, and if I do that, I've done my bit, and therefore there's nothing more. That is number one. Number two, of course, there's a technical or legal basis to who is a citizen, what makes a citizen, and in 1977 we also added a new clause or article in our constitution which provided for the fundamental duties of citizens. The constitution originally had fundamental rights, but in around 1977 it seemed people realized that citizens should also have fundamental duties, which is sort of interesting. Now, the other issue that I think in India is extremely important is who is sovereign? And I have written about this. Normally, I would imagine the people are sovereign. Because people, we say in the first line of our constitution, we the people of India, etc., so on and so forth. So people are supposedly, they have given themselves a constitution. But how the constitution works or how it is made to work is a very, very significant issue on which Dr. Rajendra Prasad, our first president, and a constitutional scholar, Grenville Austin, have both said, in different words of course, that constitutions are inert documents. They do not work. They are worked by people. Now, normally, the constitution would be worked by people who are, constitutionally mandated to enforce the constitution, to uphold the constitution. And that ultimately works out to the executive branch of the government and the judicial branch of the government. Now, in India, the executive branch comes out of the legislative branch. The legislative branch or the legislator representation comes through elections. But in Indian elections, the individual candidate or even the individual voter really doesn't have much say. People who contest elections are not grateful or obliged to their voters. They are more grateful to the people who make them who give them nominations of the parties. The number of independent candidates contesting has been going up, but the number of independent candidates actually getting elected has been going down. In the current parliament. It is, I think, 4. So independent candidates are out of consideration. You cannot have a reasonable chance of getting elected unless a political party supports you. And once that happens, the citizens lose all connect with the system. The parties will select candidates whom they like, and there has been mention of criminalization and so on. There are multiple constituencies where more than 3 candidates and all the leading candidates are of dubious background, and therefore citizens have often no choice. So I think, at least in India, what citizens can do or should try to do is to influence the working of political parties. Because in a representative democracy like India, we don't have any other option but to have a representative democracy. So unless the citizens can set the political parties, and I say this not very happily, unless the citizens can set the political parties right, I don't think Indian democracy will improve. And we as a citizen group have been trying to do this for 20 years. But unfortunately, the data that comes through after every election, in the 4 election cycles over 20 years, the number of people with criminal cases pending against them getting elected to our national parliament has consistently gone up. Obviously, there is a problem. What we are doing is not having an effect. And I feel very, it's not a very pleasant thing to say that we've been wasted our 20 years of work. But it is the political parties who are the roadblock. The political parties are able to get away by openly defying the law. And then rule of law is supposed to be a necessary concomitant of a democracy. I mean, supposedly we have a rule of law, but that law does not apply to political parties, period. Now, in such a condition, how can we say that the democracy can be improved? So I think citizens need to work on trying to make political parties internally democratic. That's another irony in India, that political parties who are supposed to be the so-called pillars of democracy, they are not democratic. So we have completely non-democratic groups trying to run democracy. And this is not rocket science, or this is not that has just been discovered. This has been stated many, many times by the Supreme Court of India, by the Law Commission of India, by several other committees appointed by the government itself. And for whatever reason, our Supreme Court, although as Dr. Qureshi mentioned, in 2003, the Supreme Court was very, very progressive, and it stood against the government of the day, and it said that the law that the parliament had passed unanimously was unconstitutional. That, I would say, was a very, very glorious moment of Indian judiciary. But the same Indian judiciary over the last 15 years, 5 times has said that we cannot make law and we request the parliament to do this, and the parliament should do this. Parliament obviously doesn't listen. The Supreme Court has an option that when there is a gap in law, they can make some interim arrangement till the legislature acts on it, which is what they did in 2003. But now they seem to be completely hesitant, or they completely seem to be unwilling to do that. So the corrosive influence of lack of political morality is the major issue in Indian democracy, and a lot of citizens are actually suffering. Everybody knows about this, but people are at a loss as to what to do. And I don't blame them. I am also at a loss at what to do. Political parties are the people whose representatives will decide what the law of the land is. And we are trying to get them to make a law which they will find uncomfortable. Although they know it is good for the society and the country, but it is uncomfortable for them. And such things keep happening. Now, as Nikhil mentioned, the electoral bond is a new phenomenon. I mean, from day one, it has now been proved that everybody except a very, very small coterie of people, everybody else disagreed with it. The Election Commission of India, the Reserve Bank of India, two constitutional authorities warned against it. But the government of the day, because they had a majority in the lower house, they went ahead and passed it. And that was also done unconstitutionally, which we have challenged in the court. But again, the court, I don't know, this becomes a little repetitive. The court said that this petition raises weighty issues which have the potential to influence the entire electoral and political system in the country. And therefore, it has to be listened to in full detail. And after that, 3 years have passed. The weighty issues are perhaps either getting more weight, or they're getting less weighted, but the court is not interested. So the political parties have to be brought under law. And my original thinking was that it is the citizenry, the judiciary, and the media who could combine to put pressure on the political system. But unfortunately, now how good can the judiciary be is in doubt, and media is I think in a very bad shape. There are very, very small pockets of independent media who are also being hounded every day. So citizens are now left to their own devices. And I think unless citizens decide or find some ways of getting together and putting pressure on the political system, the farmers' movement is a good, I suppose, a good step or a good example of that. So I think the citizenry will have to get together, and to use that cliche, we will have to take politics back from the politicians. Apparently, Mr. Churchill is supposed to have said that war is too serious a business to be left to only the generals. So I would, I suppose, paraphrase that to say that politics is much too serious a business to be left only to politicians. Each citizen has to understand that each of us has a political role, which is not limited to voting. I think that is what citizens can do. It's not an easy thing to do, I agree, but ultimately, who said life is easy? And democracy is not easy. I had given a slide, if that can be put up, Nandini or Anas. The slide which talks about democracy, I think it is the second or the third.
Yes, sir. Anas will be displaying the slides. Just give us a few
Thank you.
seconds.
Next one. This is a part of a quote from a judgment written by an American judge of the Supreme Court called Felix Frankfurter. And I actually love to read it all the time, so I'll read it again. Democracy involves hardship. And that's why I said, who said life is easy? Democracy involves hardship. The hardship of unceasing responsibility of every citizen, where the entire people do not take a continuous and considered part in public life, there can be no democracy in any meaningful sense of the term. Democracy is always a beckoning goal, not a safe harbor. And this is what General Verma said, that it is the process. For freedom is an unremitting endeavor, never a final achievement. Now, this is the preface to the punchline, which is in the next slide, if we can have that up. That is why no office in the land is more important than that of being a citizen. Ironically, when you ask people, who are you? nobody seems to think of that they are a citizen. I know I am a professor, I am a lawyer, I am a business person, I am a executive, etc., etc. And people don't realize that they cannot become any of those things unless they are citizens first. So this realization that as a citizen I have the most important office in the land, and therefore I have the maximum responsibility for ensuring democracy. I think this is what citizens needs to do. So I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Chokar, for your comments. And we will now move to the question answer session, though we are a little behind schedule, but I think 10-15 minutes can take a few questions. There are a large number of questions, but I have selected some of them. And I would request Nandini or Divya to kindly start with the questions. Yeah. Okay, so can we imagine the relevance of democracy without elections today, and how the practice of electoral politics is defined, limiting the role of democracy in India? This is from Rahul Ranjan. He's a PhD scholar in Kolkata. Dr. Qureshi, may I request you to kindly take this on?
Yes, I can, but perhaps this was best answered by Professor Chokar, who very rightly said that election is not democracy. Although I would modify it a little, that election is not the only democracy that we know, it's a part of democracy. And he very rightly pointed out that elections are held once in 5 years, whereas democracy is at work or is missing for 5 years. So, of course, we cannot have democracy without election. Therefore, to segregate the election with democracy is something which Professor may like to modify. That without election, there is no democracy. But election is not the end all and be all of democracy. That's the point he was trying to make. So that's what we need to understand. And of course, the electoral politics, the kind of electoral politics today is totally full of hate news, polarization, because that is what wins the elections. And now what can citizens do? Citizens have to be wary of it. They should be aware. And in fact, it is on everybody's lips that since the elections are close by, not very far, so we can expect communal riots. Now, this has become a pattern because raise some communal issue, polarize and win. No, so that is the electoral politics we are faced with, and we need to do something about it. And citizens only can defeat it. They should be aware that if this is happening, it is basically to fool the people and create an artificial breach between communities.
Okay, thank you. Professor Chokar, would you like to add something to this?
No, I cannot add anything to what Dr. Qureshi says.
Okay. Thank you. Can we have the next question?
I missed that, sir.
Said you have approved.
You have improved.
Oh, yes, approved. Yes.
Next question, please. Why state funding of elections or party expenses are not met from public exchequer to curb corruption in politics? Swachh Desh versus Swachh Politics by Lakshmi Narayan, who's a journalist. Again, Dr. Qureshi, you've been speaking about it a lot, so may I request you to...
Yeah. Well, I have been saying that state funding, and Professor has always corrected me that instead of calling it state funding, let's call it public funding, because ultimately it is the public expenditure, and he's right, but basically we are saying the same thing, but using two different terms. Now, why I say this, that we have seen crony capitalism. It is a buzzword in the country that 2-3 industrialists are running the country. And why? Because they have donated millions and billions to the political party concerned. Now, there should be a total ban on private collection, company donations, and instead of that, for every vote that you get, let there be 100 rupees paid to the political party. And I have calculated if it is 100 rupees, so, and there are 600 million people who voted, so about 6,000 crore rupees will be given to the elector, to the candidate. Not every party, but even the independent. Let us give 100 rupees to one person who has got one vote. So now, whether 6,000 crores will be enough? My answer is yes, it will be enough, because when we see the figures of all the donations which political parties have collected in 5 years, it comes to around that, about 5,000 crores. So here we are talking of 6,000 crores. And how do they collect money? By arm twisting, by taking bribes, by giving licenses and contracts and bank loans with which these guys run away to England. So instead of that, why don't they get all this money by dignity, by check from National Electoral Fund, which we both, Dr. Chokar and I have been talking about? Let us create an election. Second bogus argument which these guys gave, particularly at the time of introduction of electoral bonds, that the donors do not want transparency, they want secrecy. They don't want anybody to know to whom they have donated. Now, why should donors want secrecy? Because they want to hide their quid pro quo, because they want to hide the favors that they will get after giving donation. It's a very bogus argument. For 70 years, same donors were donating without any vindictive action, and they were same donor was donating to different political parties, and whosoever wins, it didn't matter to them. Now, suddenly, what happened? So, in any case, the electoral bond, we have been crying ourselves ghost, and all that I say is a 30-second solution. Okay, let us stay with the electoral bond. Just let us know who gave whom how much money, so that we can decide that if such a particular company is funding, and then we know that that company has got some licenses and contracts and bank loans, at least people will know the quid pro quo. And people's concern is being ignored. Donors' concern of lack of transparency is being addressed. So that needs to change, and we need to raise our voice. We have been raising our voice at Supreme. Court should come into the picture. Electoral bond case is pending before them for 3 years. So it is a dereliction of duty if these important national issues do not move the Supreme Court. What will? We are concerned now. Professor Chokar mentioned, and I mentioned 2003. Is what lovely judgment Supreme Court had given. Is the same institution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Qureshi. Can we have the next question? We'll take
Can I add something to this?
Yeah. Before we go to the next one, please.
I sort of must apologize to Dr. Qureshi, which I always do. But I must tell Mr. Lakshminarayan that yes, we can meet the expenses from public exchequer. But before that, we need to know how much money is needed. And the only way to know that is to find out, or to political parties and candidates to let the nation know how much have they spent. And the candidates do give so-called sworn affidavits of election expenditure, which are 99% wrong, incorrect, and false, and everybody knows it. Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee said or wrote somewhere that every parliamentarian begins his parliamentary career by telling a lie. So, the public exchequer is not a unending source of money. And what the hell is public expenditure? This is what you and I pay. Mr. Lakshminarayan should understand that it is his money that will go to political parties and candidates, and these people will still collect money from others and therefore it will be like throwing good money after bad money. You tell a person that stop taking a bribe, I will increase your salary twice. You think he will? So unless political parties come clean, I mean, we have 20 years of effort. They were told to do, they have been ordered to be public authorities under the Right to Information law. They have refused to follow that. They have been told several other things by the Supreme Court. They have refused to do that. The High Court said that two parties, BJP and Congress, are guilty of violating the FCRA and action should be taken against them. Nothing has happened. They tried to amend the law retrospectively, which the Supreme Court said was not possible, but still there's nothing happened. So, giving public money to political parties without their being completely legitimately open to public authorities and to public, in my opinion, is absolutely not justified at all. And the only example people quote is not example, a recommendation of the so-called Indrajit Gupta committee report. But in the conclusions chapter of that report, the first paragraph says that unless other issues like transparency and reduced criminalization are not done, state funding will be a waste of public money. So I agree with Dr. Qureshi's proposal of 100 rupees per vote, etc. But that can only be happen when the first thing he said first, that they should be completely banned from collecting private donations. Now this, who will ban them? I don't have an answer to this. The Election Commission cannot do that. And the judiciary is, I think, scared they will not do that. The parliament certainly will not do that. So we have actually no solution but to insist that political parties come open with their financial affairs.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Chokar. We'll move on now. While they are putting the next question, I just wanted to add, ADR has been working on criminality in the politics and the curbing of expenditure. If I may just give you the statistics, in the last 2019 general elections, India spent an amount which was almost equal to the US presidential elections, which is a huge amount. This electoral bonds animal, the new one which has come in, if I may give the amount which is involved, we have a small state called Sikkim. Its annual budget for 2020-2021 is 5,200 crores rupees. And since the inception of this electoral bond scheme in March 2018, till date, electoral bonds worth 7,500 crores have been redeemed. So that gives you the idea of this gargantuan size which is involved. So that is why it is very important that this election expenditure needs to be curbed, but it has not been heard. Okay, next question. What citizens or any body, institution can do to get a person of desirable quality as his representative? By Mr. Sudhakaran from the Great India Trust. Yeah, Professor Chokar, may I ask you? Nikhil has left because of internet issues. He was not able to connect. He was in a village actually.
While this is what can anybody or any institution do is to find a good person of desirable quality and persuade her or him to contest the election and work for him or her. I mean, there's no secret here or there's no rocket science. Get a good person and persuade him or her and then work for him or her, that's it. I don't know whether Dr. Qureshi would like to add something.
No,
for people who are candidates by the political parties are not really very desirable. That
So they should get people who are, not in political parties and then create an environment for them. And Mr. Sudhakaran, as I notice, it belongs to what is called Great India Trust. So India will become great when people like Mr. Sudhakaran will find good people, support them, and it's not going to happen in one election. It's a 15, 20-year project. As a matter of fact, when I say 15, 20-year project, I sort of question myself because we've been trying to do this for 20 years and we've not succeeded. So any institution or body will have to work at it with a long-term commitment. It is very easy to destroy a democracy, but it is very difficult to build a democracy. There have been a plethora of books on how to kill democracy, how democracies die, and there's a recent one about India with an Indian and some, I think, Australian author. So killing democracies in a democratic way. Of course, the finest example, why finest, the most well-known example has been of Hitler, but there are multiple other things going on. I mean, there is Turkey, there is Brazil, there is Hungary, there is the Philippines, and of course, you don't have to go very far. So it is hard work, and that's it.
okay. Would you like to add something, Dr. Qureshi?
No. Professor Saab has summed it up very well.
Okay, thank you. So one last question, please. What are the steps which ECI can take within its own framework to stop candidates to contest elections who are accused of serious and heinous crimes registered against them and are under trial? Mr. Devansh. There are a number of things which have been done. Dr. Qureshi, you might like to.
Yeah. No, it's a mistake. People blame the election commission for criminalization of politics. You should know that the election commission has absolutely no role. We know the candidate is a murderer. At the time of nomination, he is an affidavit to us that he has committed murder, rape, dacoity, kidnapping. But we can't do anything because we cannot disqualify. We work within operation of law. It is the question of law, and that's why we have been demanding that the law should be amended so that the people against convicted people are debarred from contesting anyway. It is only the ongoing and the pending cases we are talking about. For cases are pending for 20 years. A rapist continues to be a MP or a minister. So basically, to avoid that, our formulation has been that people against heinous offences are pending, which means rape, dacoity, murder, kidnapping. They should not political cases. Somebody violated Section 144. Somebody abused somebody. No, forget about them. These are insignificant small cases, but serious cases. They should be debarred from contesting during pendency. The answer given is that there is the law of the land is that there is presumption of innocence. Unless you are proved guilty, you are innocent. For 20 years, the case is going on. You have not been proved guilty. You are innocent, right? Now, I have a counter question, and which I have asked in various fora where judges were sitting, juries were sitting, and I've written many times. Not one person has been able to answer this, and I'll raise the question again. In Indian jails today, there are 430,000 prisoners, of which 370,000 are under trial, within innocent. Yet, within the ambit of law, you have taken away 4 of their fundamental rights: the right to liberty, freedom of movement, freedom of occupation, right to dignity. Now, fundamental rights taken of innocent citizens within the ambit of law. Now, right to contest is not even a fundamental right. Therefore, why can't it be taken away? Like right to the freedom of movement or freedom of anything. These 4, No, there, that is where well, let us answer this. In fact, in an article which I wrote 15 days ago, my last line was an appeal to the Supreme Court Chief Justice to take my article as a PIL. I'm saying that please release the 370,000 innocent people immediately. How can you take away their liberty when they are innocent? So there's a presumption of innocence. Whenever it suits them, they quote it. Otherwise, they are violating it themselves. So, and in fact, Law Commission, which consists of all jurists, even they have recommended this. They're not fools like us. The Election Commission is not lawyers. We may not know our law, but Law Commission does. Even they have recommended this. So what happens, because it doesn't suit political parties, consensus will never happen, and consensus happens only when they want to increase their salaries. 30 seconds, all get together and the bill is passed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. On the recommendation of my yeah.
No, let me add a word to this.
Okay.
Dr. Qureshi has actually given the entire background, but the simple answer to the question is there is nothing ECI can do. It has to be done either by the Parliament, actually only by the Parliament, and Parliament will not do it. It has not done it for 20 years. Therefore, the only possibility is for the Supreme Court to step in and to not make, but modify this law to fill in this gap in legislation till the legislature does something about it. And I think that is all that can be done. The ECI can do nothing.
Also, if I may come in a little supplement. Now, one is a law coming in, and law will never come. I agree with Professor Chokar, they will never do it. But the alternative route was available to the Supreme Court, which is the fast-track courts. In fact, in 2013, Supreme Court said that all the cases against MPs and MLAs should be decided within 1 year. And if any court is not able to decide, they should report to the respective Chief Justice of the High Court. Now it is 7 years, that decision has not been reviewed yet. Supreme Court itself should review what happened to the fast tracking. Okay, instead of allowing it to drag for 20 years, let them decide whether the minister is innocent or guilty within 6 months, 1 year.
Okay, thank you. We are running a bit, we've overshot the time already, but on my team's request, there's one question for Lena. Can you please show that question? That will be the last one. Yeah. So despite increasing electoral participation in India, which is against the global decline phenomena, India has paradoxically started lagging behind in terms of freedom of expression, media integrity, both at institutional and individual level against global trends, as per Lena's slides. How can this state subversion be withheld by citizens? How should India look at that very paradoxical situation?
Thank you. I hope I understood correctly. But, well, I mean, first of all, I mean, the freedoms and media integrity they are declining globally. That is not only in India. But it is true that the electoral participation, unlike in many other countries, electoral participation has increased. Whereas in many Western democracies, what we are having now is a sort of an apathy and non-interest on when it comes to elections as one of the greatest threats in terms of democracy. But well, as was mentioned here by the professor, the democracy is full of contradictions. And I believe the increased electoral participation is also a result of the earlier work by the EMBs that were trying to reach out more people to register, reaching out to first-time voters, and so there has been some good job done there in order to get more and more people to enroll. Even though even more is to be done in order to try to, for example, in terms of enfranchising the migrant workers or absent voters, what we call, so that they could also exercise their democratic rights. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, these are the contradictions that the democracies of today's democracies are having more and more.
Okay. Thank you, Lina. We have a lot of unanswered, unaddressed questions, but due to paucity of time, I think I'll have to wind up here. And I would like to thank the esteemed panelists and all the participants who participate today. And my apologies to the people whose questions we could not address, but you can always interact with us on mail or this thing. I would only like to reiterate the slide which Professor Choker showed by the American judge, Mr. Felix Frankfurter, where he highlighted the fact that it is basically the citizens who have to take this on their shoulders, and they cannot sort of ignore the thing. Otherwise, democracy will slide in the countries. We will end the webinar here. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you and bye.
Apology.